You reach for a word and it vanishes. You walk into a room and forget why you came. You read the same paragraph 3 times and still can't remember what it said. You tell yourself it's nothing. Just stress, just lack of sleep, just getting older. But here's what no one is telling you. Your brain is breaking. And if you're under 40, it's happening faster than anyone thought possible. This isn't a theory. This isn't alarmist speculation. This is a crisis that scientists have just confirmed, and the numbers are terrifying. Between 2013 and 2023, the number of young adults reporting serious problems with memory, concentration, and decision-making has nearly doubled. We're not talking about seniors experiencing age-related decline. We're talking about people in their 20s and 30s, people who should be in their cognitive prime, suddenly struggling to remember, to focus, to think clearly. And the most disturbing part? Most of them don't even realize what's happening. Let's start with the data because it's shocking enough to demand your full attention. A landmark study published in Neurology in late 2025, conducted by researchers at Yale University, analyzed over 4.5 million survey responses from American adults. The findings are unprecedented. Among adults aged 18 to 39, the rate of self-reported cognitive disability jumped from 5% in 2013 to 9.7% in 2023. That's nearly 1 in 10 young adults now reporting serious difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions. Think about that. In just 1 decade, the prevalence has almost doubled. Meanwhile, and this is where it gets truly strange, older adults showed the opposite trend. Among people aged 70 and above, cognitive disability rates actually declined slightly from 7.3% to 6.6%. The generation that should be experiencing cognitive decline is stable or improving. The generation that should be thriving is collapsing. Something is fundamentally wrong. The researchers defined cognitive disability as having serious difficulty with 3 core functions: concentration, memory, and decision-making. These aren't minor inconveniences. These are the fundamental building blocks of human cognition. Without them, you can't learn effectively, work productively, or navigate complex social situations. You become, in essence, a shadow of your cognitive potential. And for millions of young adults, this is no longer a distant threat. It's their current reality. So what's causing this? That's the question keeping researchers awake at night. Because unlike traditional cognitive decline, which has well-established causes, aging, dementia, stroke, this phenomenon doesn't fit any existing model. Young adults aren't developing Alzheimer's at unprecedented rates. Their brains aren't showing the structural damage we associate with dementia. Yet they're struggling to think, and the struggle is getting worse. One major factor appears to be the digital environment we've created. Consider what your brain has to process every single day. You wake up to notifications, you scroll through social media before you even get out of bed. You check emails, respond to messages, consume news, watch videos, read articles, all while simultaneously trying to work, maintain relationships, and manage the basic logistics of being alive. Your attention is fractured into thousands of micro moments, each one pulling you in a different direction. And your brain, which evolved for a vastly simpler world, is drowning. Neuroscience has shown that constant task switching, what we mistakenly call multitasking, degrades cognitive performance. Every time you shift attention from one thing to another, there's a cognitive cost, a brief moment where your brain has to reorient, recalibrate, reload context. When you're switching tasks dozens or hundreds of times per day, those costs accumulate. You end up in a state of perpetual cognitive overload, where your working memory is maxed out, your attention is depleted, and your ability to form new long-term memories is compromised. Then there's the quality of attention itself. Deep, sustained focus, the kind required for complex thinking, learning, or creative work, has become almost impossible for many people. The average person checks their phone over 100 times per day. Studies show that even having your phone nearby, face down, and silent, reduces available cognitive capacity. Your brain knows it's there, knows there might be something new, something important, something you're missing. And that knowledge creates a low-level anxiety that siphons off mental resources. You're cognitively hobbled before you even begin a task. Social media deserves special attention here because its effects on cognition are particularly insidious. Platforms are engineered to maximize engagement, which means they're designed to hijack your attention. The infinite scroll, the variable reward schedule, the algorithmic feed that learns exactly what will keep you watching, these aren't accidents. They're the product of billions of dollars in research into how to make content addictive. And addiction is the right word. Brain imaging studies show that social media use activates the same reward pathways as gambling and substance abuse. But the damage goes deeper than mere distraction. Social media creates a constant state of social comparison. You're perpetually exposed to curated highlights of other people's lives, their successes, their relationships, their experiences. And your brain, which didn't evolve to process this much social information, interprets this as a signal that you're falling behind, that everyone else is doing better, achieving more, living fuller lives. This triggers stress, anxiety, and a sense of inadequacy. And chronic stress, as we'll explore, has devastating effects on cognitive function. Let's talk about stress more directly. The Yale study found that cognitive disability rates were highest among adults with household incomes below $35,000. For this group, rates jumped from 8.8% to 12.6% over the decade. Meanwhile, adults earning over $75,000 saw only a modest increase, from 1.8% to 3.9%. The pattern is clear. Economic stress is a major driver of cognitive decline. And this makes biological sense. When you're worried about money, about job security, about whether you can afford rent or health care or groceries, your brain is in a perpetual state of threat response. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, is constantly activated. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, floods your system. And while cortisol is useful in short bursts, it helps you respond to immediate threats. Chronic elevation is toxic. It damages the hippocampus, the brain region critical for forming new memories. It impairs the prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like planning, decision-making, and impulse control. Essentially, chronic stress rewires your brain in ways that make thinking harder. The modern work environment compounds this problem. Many young adults face precarious employment, gig work, contract positions, jobs with no benefits or security. The pressure to be constantly productive, constantly available, constantly proving your worth. The blurring of boundaries between work and personal life, especially with remote work. You're never truly off, never fully able to rest. And your brain, which needs downtime to consolidate memories and clear out metabolic waste, never gets the recovery it requires. Education levels tell a similar story. Adults without a high school diploma saw cognitive disability rates rise from 11% to 14.3%, while college graduates increased from only 2% to 3.6%. Education doesn't just provide knowledge, it builds cognitive reserve, a buffer against cognitive decline. People with higher education have practiced complex thinking, learned strategies for problem solving, and developed mental flexibility. They have, in essence, stronger cognitive infrastructure. And when stress or environmental factors challenge that infrastructure, they're better equipped to withstand it. There's also a racial and ethnic dimension to this crisis. American Indian and Alaska Native adults reported the highest cognitive disability rates, climbing from 7.5% to 11.2%. Hispanic adults went from 6.8% to 9.9%. Black adults from 7.3% to 8.2%. These disparities reflect structural inequalities, differences in access to healthcare, exposure to environmental toxins, experiences of discrimination, and chronic stress. Racism isn't just a social issue, it's a neurological one. The constant vigilance required to navigate a society that devalues you, the cumulative trauma of discrimination, the physiological toll of living in survival mode. All of this impacts brain function. Another factor researchers are considering: the relationship between physical health and cognitive health. The study found that adults with a history of stroke reported cognitive disability rates exceeding 18% in 2023. Hypertension, diabetes, and high cholesterol were all associated with elevated rates. These vascular and metabolic conditions damage blood vessels, reducing blood flow to the brain. Without adequate oxygen and nutrients, neurons can't function properly. Over time, this can lead to what's called vascular cognitive impairment, a gradual decline in thinking abilities caused by reduced blood supply. But here's where it gets complicated. The relationship is bidirectional. Cognitive disability can make it harder to manage chronic illness. If you're struggling to remember, concentrate, or make decisions, you're less likely to adhere to medication schedules, attend medical appointments, or make healthy lifestyle choices. So poor physical health damages cognition, and impaired cognition makes physical health worse. It's a vicious cycle, and for many young adults, it's already in motion. There's also the possibility, uncomfortable as it is to consider, that we're seeing the early effects of environmental factors we don't yet fully understand. Microplastics in our food and water, forever chemicals in everyday products, air pollution, pesticide residues. We know these substances can cross the blood-brain barrier. We know they can interfere with neural function, but the long-term cognitive effects, especially on developing brains, are still being studied. It's entirely possible that we're conducting a mass experiment on ourselves, and the results are only now becoming visible. Some researchers have suggested that increasing awareness and decreasing stigma might explain part of the rise. Maybe young adults today are simply more willing to acknowledge cognitive struggles that previous generations would have hidden. There's truth to this. Mental health conversations have become more normalized. Admitting you're struggling is less shameful than it once was. But this explanation can't account for the entire increase. A near doubling in a single decade is too dramatic to be explained by reporting changes alone. Something real is happening to young people's brains. Then there's the sleep crisis. Young adults are sleeping less and sleeping worse than any previous generation. The reasons are multiple: economic pressure to work longer hours, the stress of student debt and job insecurity, the stimulating effects of screens and blue light exposure before bed, the anxiety and doom scrolling that keeps people awake. But whatever the cause, the effect on cognition is devastating. Sleep is when your brain consolidates memories, clears out toxins, and repairs damage. Chronic sleep deprivation is essentially cognitive self-sabotage. You're preventing your brain from doing the maintenance it desperately needs. Research has shown that even mild sleep restriction, getting 6 hours instead of 8, leads to measurable declines in attention, working memory, and executive function. And these effects are cumulative. Miss an hour of sleep per night for a week, and you're functioning as if you've pulled an all-nighter. Now imagine doing that for months or years. Your cognitive performance doesn't just decline, it collapses. The study also found geographic disparities. The South and Midwest reported higher cognitive disability rates than the Northeast and West. U.S. territories like Puerto Rico and Guam had rates exceeding 9%. These regional differences likely reflect variations in healthcare access, economic opportunities, environmental conditions, and social support systems. If you live in an area with limited resources, higher poverty, and fewer opportunities, the cognitive toll is greater. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this crisis is how invisible it is. Unlike a physical injury, you can't see cognitive decline. There's no blood, no broken bone, no clear moment when something goes wrong. It's gradual, insidious. You become slightly worse at remembering names, a little more prone to distraction, a bit slower to make decisions, and because the decline is slow, you adapt. You tell yourself everyone's like this. You blame external factors, stress at work, too much going on, just a bad day. You don't realize that your baseline has shifted, that what used to be easy now requires effort, that your brain is not functioning as it should. And here's the terrifying implication. If these trends continue, we could be facing a generation that reaches middle age with cognitive function already impaired. A workforce where concentration and memory are increasingly unreliable. A society where basic decision-making becomes collectively harder. The long-term consequences, for individuals, for the economy, for democracy itself, are staggering. So what can be done? The good news, if there is any, is that cognitive decline in young adults is likely reversible. Unlike neurodegenerative diseases, which involve permanent structural damage, the factors driving this crisis are mostly environmental and behavioral. Change the environment, change the behavior, and the brain can recover. First, we need to reclaim attention. This means setting boundaries with technology, designated phone-free times, turning off non-essential notifications, creating environments where deep focus is possible. The brain needs uninterrupted blocks of time to do complex work. Even 25 minutes of sustained focus can be restorative if it's truly uninterrupted. Practice single tasking. Do one thing at a time with your full attention. It will feel uncomfortable at first. Your brain will itch for stimulation. But over time, your capacity for sustained focus will rebuild. Second, address sleep as a non-negotiable priority. Not something you fit in when everything else is done, but a foundational requirement for brain health. Aim for 7 to 9 hours per night. Create a consistent sleep schedule. Reduce screen time before bed. Make your bedroom dark, quiet, and cool. If you're struggling with sleep, seek help, whether that's cognitive, behavioral therapy for insomnia, addressing underlying anxiety or depression, or simply making lifestyle changes. Improving sleep will improve every aspect of cognitive function. Third, manage stress through both internal and external strategies. Internally, mindfulness meditation has been shown to reduce activity in the amygdala and increase prefrontal control. Regular physical exercise is perhaps the single most effective intervention for cognitive health, increasing blood flow to the brain, promoting neurogenesis, and reducing inflammation. Social connection, genuine face-to-face relationships, provides emotional support and cognitive stimulation. Externally, advocate for systemic changes, better wages, job security, affordable health care, access to education. These aren't just economic issues, they're cognitive health issues. Fourth, treat your brain as you would any other vital organ. Nutrition matters. A diet rich in omega-3 fatty acids, antioxidants, and whole foods supports neural function. Hydration matters. Chronic disease management matters. If you have hypertension, diabetes, or high cholesterol, treating these conditions protects your brain. Regular cognitive challenges, learning new skills, engaging with complex ideas, solving problems, keep neural pathways active and strong. Finally, we need societal acknowledgement that this is a crisis. The same way we talk about physical health, we need to talk about cognitive health. Schools, workplaces, and communities need to create environments that support rather than undermine brain function. This means rethinking how we structure work, how we design technology, how we organize society. It means asking, are we creating conditions that allow human brains to thrive, or are we systematically degrading them? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We've built a world that our brains weren't designed for, a world of infinite information, constant stimulation, relentless pressure, chronic stress, and fragmented attention. And now we're seeing the consequences. Young adults, the people who should be at their cognitive peak, are struggling. Not because they're weak or lazy or inferior, but because the environment they're navigating is hostile to healthy brain function. Your brain is not broken because of some personal failing. It's struggling because it's trying to function in conditions that would challenge any human nervous system. And if you're feeling the effects, the forgetfulness, the difficulty focusing, the sense that thinking is harder than it used to be, you're not alone. Millions of young adults are experiencing the same thing. This is a collective crisis, and it requires collective solutions, but it also requires individual action. Because while we wait for systemic change, your brain is aging. Your cognitive function is either being protected or eroded every single day, based on the choices you make. And those choices matter. Choosing focus over distraction, rest over exhaustion, connection over isolation, health over hustle. These aren't luxuries. They're necessities for a functioning brain. The study's authors ended with a call for more research, more awareness, more intervention. They're right. But research takes time, and your brain can't wait. Start now. Pay attention to how you feel. Notice when thinking becomes hard. Take breaks, sleep enough, move your body, reduce the digital noise, seek support when you need it. Treat your cognitive health as seriously as you'd treat any other health concern, because it is serious. Your ability to think, to remember, to decide, this is what makes you who you are, and it's under threat. So yes, your brain might be breaking, but it doesn't have to stay that way. The damage isn't permanent. The decline isn't inevitable. You have more control than you think. And the first step is simply recognizing that this is real. That what you're experiencing isn't just you. That there's a reason thinking feels harder. And that reason is reversible. Your mind is not lost. It's just overburdened, undersupported, and operating in a world it wasn't built for. Give it what it needs: rest, focus, care, protection, and it can recover. The cognitive crisis is real, but so is your capacity to heal. If this resonated with you, subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and share your city in the comments. Let's build a global community of brain health awareness together.